it provides the ad channels a level playing field on how to approach that user and provide the most relevant ad to that user. And that has not been the case until now.
So we got ATT from Apple last year in iOS 14.5, and this year we have Privacy Sandbox for Android. Ad IDs are clearly an endangered species. What does that mean for ad tech companies? What changes? What stays the same? And how will it impact mobile app publishers and marketers? To chat about it, we've got Yevgeny Peres from ironSource. Yevgeny, welcome to Growth Masterminds.
Thanks, Joe. Yeah, great to be here.
Hey, awesome to have you. Let's start here. Super general question. We've had Privacy Sandbox for Android for a couple weeks now. What are your overall feelings, your first impressions?
Generally, I think the sentiment is very positive. Yeah, I think the difference here is, obviously there's it's kind of easier being second to do such a change. So I guess Google has learned a lot for the last 2 years and how the market reacted and what challenges were in delivering and how it was delivered and how the tech works. And I think at this time, I think the way, the burning privacy challenges are being addressed, whether it's how the conversation goes around and how the tech is designed around this is definitely, I want to say more, less disruptive and more positive with privacy in mind and also with the marketers in mind. Definitely an interesting and different approach within this proposal.
It is an interesting difference, right? I mean, when Apple launched it, it was kind of a hurry up offense. There was a bit of grace time given when Apple saw the ecosystem was not even close to being ready. And Google did get, it's kind of like a cheat sheet, right? They saw what happened. They saw how that rollout went. They saw the impact, by the way. They saw the impact that all of a sudden advertising became more popular on Android because you could still track it there, and it went down on iOS. So they kind of had a cheat sheet of what to do, what not to do, maybe what to build, what not to build. Let's start here. The ad ID deprecation for Android is 2 years away. Is that so long that we shouldn't even think about it right now? Or is it something that we need to start prepping for right now?
Yeah, I think until this point in time, even before ATT was introduced, the platforms were a bit different. Those similar, they relied on this device level advertising identifier. Here, while the timeline is 2 years out, it's 100% clear what will happen with the identifier, which was not the case exactly with IDFA. So there's a lot of noise around what will be the ATT opt-in rates, what will be the impact on each platform, on each marketer. Here, it's pretty clear. IDFA is still here in a different shape and form. And within this proposal, it's completely out, the GID. And 2 years is not a lot of time. And I think with how the proposal is built and how it's being rolled out with the participation of the ecosystem, I think it's definitely a good time to start, thinking this through and collaborating on how this will become a standard that actually works. So definitely a good time to start at least reading the documentation, which is pretty long.
It is pretty long. It's pretty involved. I'm doing a series on a deep dive into kind of 4 major chunks of it. I'm sort of halfway through. I will say one thing, that if history is any indicator, most people will avoid doing anything about it until it's very late in the day, maybe too late, and then finally get all super busy and maybe kind of not be able to implement very well. Let's dive into some of the key changes. We see topics, we see Fledge. How do those technologies change mobile ad networks?
Both of these kind of approaches or solutions are providing something to the general ecosystem. I think to the ad networks, the mediation platforms, the MMPs, and how exactly the dots connect. I think specifically when we break it down, topics provide something to each ad player, um, which is this insight on what are the topics that that specific user is generated without while preserving the user's privacy in a way that can't really connect the dots across apps and figure out who that user is. And it provides the ad channels a level playing field on how to approach that user and provide the most relevant ad to that user. And that has not been the case until now. I think until this proposal was out there, each ad platform was trying to gain those insights um, or similar insights in different ways, and it resulted in different user experiences out there. And Pledge actually is pretty interesting. Retargeting in general is something that has not been fully adopted ever for most marketers for many reasons. And I guess one reason is how complex it is to maintain the processes of defining the audiences and managing this kind of data, creating, populating those audiences, and also providing those audiences to the marketing channels. So this had to move from clients to servers and back to other servers and other MVPs and back to the same users. And there was a lot of GIDs floating around. So it was somewhat complex, and also it included the risk of what will those audiences, what will be done with those audiences, and can that be used against the users or against the app developers themselves? So many ended up not really utilizing that marketing approach.
Mm-hmm.
And Fledge introduces uh, something that I think addresses the bigger challenges with how retargeting used to work while preserving privacy. And I think it kind of introduces an opportunity because it makes it somewhat easier to the app developer itself, definitely less riskier. It puts the heavy lifting on the marketing channels to support that. But if the dots connect at the end of the day, a user that is engaging with a certain element within an app, and that the app developer will like to retarget that user with a certain ad, pretty much everything is happening on the device itself. And I would say it's somewhat easier to implement on the app developer side. An opportunity on Legend topics, again, it's just something that is great for the users, for the app developers, and for the marketing channels. This is setting a new standard out there.
That's really interesting. That's a new take on Fledge, which is about retargeting, that I haven't seen before. That, hey, it actually makes it easier. It actually kind of makes it kind of part of the OS in a sense, and something that marketers can do more as a matter of course. In terms of targeting, I think you'd probably have to say that topics make it harder. You did say that, look, now there's kind of this, I don't want to say level playing field, but there's this kind of single way, at least within this privacy sandbox framework, for ad networks and ad tech companies to do targeting, to get the right ad to the right person at the right time. How does topics change mediation?
I think it's early to say. In general, I think for mediation and perhaps other players out there, that this proposal introduces opportunities that might unlock. That very much depending on how the proposal will end up looking at it. Like, but the role of how the mediation platform itself participates in this introduces actually a lot more potential value to the app developer that is integrating that platform. in the context of topics and in the context of pledge as well, and also in the context of how exactly our ads delivered uh, in this new paradigm. But it is early to say for sure.
It is going to be super interesting to see how the mediation platforms use this, work with this, and how they differentiate themselves in this. Maybe put yourself into a marketer's shoes from a mobile user growth professional. What changes with Privacy Sandbox?
It's hard to judge it. There's one thing that I assume is that the proposal will evolve into something uh, that, as part of the process of how it's being rolled out, it will facilitate the conversation and create these, I want to say, methodologies and tools to address it. But I also assume that within those years, things will change in general around how marketers address these new paradigms that are, um, it's official. You cannot use the device identifiers anymore. They're not going to be available. You need to start prepping up. And in a sense, obviously the privacy handle is different than how ATT and scan works, but there is some similarity there. And I think also assume that within those 2 years, ATT and scan will evolve as well. The bottom line, I think that with how specifically Privacy Sandbox works, there is no disruption to the end user in terms of the user experience, the ad user experience. I would like to even think that actually ads will become more relevant to a certain extent. Uh, And there's significantly less disruption to almost no disruption to some of how the current tech works in
Mm-hmm.
terms of how attribution works, how post-control measurement works. It is different, but it's much closer to how the platforms are used to today.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, so definitely, there's going to be some learning to be done, and the methodology and tools will evolve. But I think um, I'm very optimistic on how this actually makes it more easier to consume this type of solution, this type of approach to the average market.
Yeah. There does seem to be some bias in topics to scale of perhaps SDKs, perhaps apps, perhaps ad tech companies that are in more apps and therefore can set more topics and other things like that. Do you see that as well?
Actually, I'm not sure. I I'm not sure at all. I think you know uh, Google at the end of the day is a big part of their business is the advertising business, and it's very clear to see that they're approaching it from this angle as well. And I'm less concerned about um, that. At the end of the day, there are not there aren't that many big platforms out there that have this kind of reach, but I'm not concerned about how exactly topics will be utilized
Mm-hmm.
between platforms, because at the end of the day, I think the industry will evolve with this new uh, tool available. And if it is an issue, I think it will be raised in the next couple of years, and how this proposal is rolled out.
There certainly seems to be a feeling in the community that this is not as big a deal as ATT was on iOS. Your thoughts?
I understand the sentiment, but it's something that they had, just like you said earlier, they had the time to, they had the cheat sheet. And so I assume they had the time to learn and approach this in a different way. And the fact that it's just less disruptive um, takes takes on the same challenges and a different approach. And I believe in some cases solves them much better. I think it's something that I assume that will also impact Apple's approach to this as well. But definitely, I can understand the sentiment. But don't forget that people were talking about it for 2 years, so it's easier for them. The bomb was already dropped 2 years on how privacy.
Yes, it was, and
So,
I'm also interested. I think that given that Apple now has a chance to see how Google's done it, I have a hard time believing that won't impact the future roadmap for SK Ad Network and what they might add there, in addition to the feedback they've received from the ecosystem about what might be missing. Let's turn to one of the other major technologies in Privacy Sandbox for Android, and that is SDK runtime, which is a pretty novel idea, at least in terms of SDKs for mobile apps, but it's something that we've seen elsewhere in computing paradigms, right? Putting things in a box, sandboxing them. Any concerns about that? Any kudos about that? What are your thoughts?
big kudos. 100%. I think on many fronts, this is something that I think the market needed, regardless of the winds of change around privacy. It just doesn't make sense that, especially with the amount of SDKs that are out there within each app. Um, it just doesn't make sense. I think the first and biggest thing that is interesting here is the fact that an SDK will not necessarily have the same permissions that the parent app has. It
Hmm.
just doesn't make sense. It's kind of crazy that this is how it used to be. And I think it also acknowledges the challenges on the distribution of the SDKs, how SDKs are being integrated by the app developers, how much challenges introduced in that process, and also the app stores themselves, and updating and reviewing every SDK update again and again and again, even though it's pretty much the same SDKs out there across the board, same versions. So definitely, I think that these efforts are addressed here in a way that, when you think about the tech solution, the SDK, the provider, the developer, and even the users, they will not need to update the apps as much. I assume they will witness less crashes because it's easier to fix things on the go. Yeah, so overall, big kudos on the change. Definitely be forward.
It is a different reality. It's pretty interesting. Submit your SDK right to Google, get that approved. There you go. Link it dynamically in your app. The SDK in the app can be updated independently, assuming you don't have functionality that's dependent in any way, shape, or form. Very cool. And sandboxing makes some sense because it's not like we haven't seen some SDKs out there that are bad behaviors. We've seen some bad guys out there of SDKs, and there's been some bad actors that have used that to snoop on what other ad networks are doing and kind of get access to that as well.
I think the fact that Google is taking over that, the relationship with those entities as well, and streamlining that process, puts a lot of, I think, there's the risk of doing something like these players have done in the past is just much higher these days, I think. Um, it's something that's, I think that the relationship with Google here is critical and how exactly that product will evolve. And that's a big part of our participation with Google as well. Um, it's something that also I think is a big element of the SDK runtime, which is basically the relationship between the platforms and the tech providers behind those SDKs that all app developers use. It's a
Hmm.
big change.
Makes sense. Okay, final last big topic to hit here is attribution reporting, right? That'll change somewhat significantly. Looks like there will be good data there. There's some interesting ways of doing things in sort of private cloud aggregators, according to the way Google has it set up. Any concerns there? Oh, that looks interesting.
Um, I think, first of all, big disclaimer, I still haven't figured out everything in the documentation. It is. It is.
I'm going to pause right there and I'm going to just say, you know what? Not everything is figure outable in that documentation. There's a lot there. It's not 100% clear to me. And I've read through in a pretty detailed way how credit gets assigned to an ad network. There's some confusion there, I think.
Yeah. Also, I think it's a big difference between, I think, these scans that are completely two different topics. Here it's within the same, within the same paradigm shift. It's packaged within. I think the fact that GID is completely out the door, and the refer mechanism looks like as well is probably going to be relevant here, unless some specific use case that is probably not going to be related to standard measurement. The way I understand it for now is it's not going to be disruptive. There's a lot of engineering on how exactly to connect the dots, which role the client, the device will play, the servers, Google servers, the MMP servers, the ad platform servers. But what's interesting here to me is that it's setting a 100% level playing field. That's at least how I read it for now. 100% level. I like the fact that you don't need to invest so much time and thought in trying to strategize, how to spend the post install conversions. On a couple levels. One is that you can pretty much send, whatever you want. And each platform will only be able to choose what's, the top, at least for what I said, the top 3 type of events that they care about. Which was a huge challenge within Scan, where you're trying to kind of strategize and engineer it to fit everyone. In this case, it's less about that. It's actually more about anonymizing it. And also there was, naturally in comparing between the two. But I think the part where you don't need to strategize about the first 24 hours versus the rest here, I think, I think it just makes it
less stressful.
It makes it actionable, 100% less disruptive. And, it's also, I think it addresses privacy in a way that, not only in how it's actually done, obviously the GID being away, but also I think the part that I think is great there is that 30 days is where, things start off. It's different than how today that data is being shared. It's hard to police, from the marketer's perspective, things like data retention policies. Because these postbacks from a certain device are being sent for 3 years. It's harder for the app developer to understand where it ended up. And in this case, there's a clear cut 30 days. That's it. If you are able to try and triangulate something, that signal is off the table and you lose that user. But again, it's actionable. You can build boards. You can theoretically run day 30 ROS optimizations. So definitely this combination of user level signals that are anonymized and aggregated that are actionable. Definitely great news, and I definitely hope that Scan will go around these elements as well.
Excellent. Very interesting. Well, Yevgeny, want to thank you for this time. I know it's late for you, so appreciate it. And you had to move because the video needed to be better and all this stuff. So thank you so much for your time. Do appreciate it.
Thank you, John. Thank you, Sally.